or not this was a carjacking. We do know that there was a female passenger who jumped out of the vehicle when this pursuit began about a half hour ago. This driver now back in the Pacoima area, which is where we picked up this chase at around 8:30 here on KCAL 9 News. So it appears he's circling back, but still going at a very steady, relatively slow pace. And again, Lieutenant Griffiths, I've asked you this before, but it almost seems idiotic for a driver to just keep going, knowing that there are so many police vehicles around and he's not going to get away. But clearly this person just wants perhaps his 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there's a saying in law enforcement, we only catch the stupid ones. And it seems to be the stupid one that just keeps going no matter whether he's going to get caught or not.
And knowing that this driver, Lieutenant, is just not going too fast, what do you think is going through their minds? Are they trying to find an escape route? Are they trying to figure out how they're going to surrender? You know, you've dealt with so many criminals. What do you think is happening right now?
Well, most of them just say they just didn't want to go to jail right now, so they're going to keep going. A lot of times they'll be on the phone saying goodbye to family members that they're not going to be able to call from jail, or the family members are calling them and, you know, saying they can see them on the news.
Well, we did just see, it looks like some folks maybe just standing on the sidewalk there. Now that he continues to circle in this area, I'm sure attention is starting to grow and people are starting to want to watch this. And of course, that's never a good idea, especially considering the driver may possibly be armed. And we don't know for sure, but we think that this may be a stolen Uber vehicle. So certainly for folks at home, if you are watching this right now, please don't come outside. Please stay indoors and don't try to communicate with the driver. Obviously, this is a dangerous situation, and certainly law enforcement does not want you to sort of get up close or involved in any way.
Now, does it look like this driver to you, Peter, is speeding up a little bit?
I would say it looks like earlier when we saw him, he was going probably, I would say, about 30 miles per hour, and now it looks like suddenly he's gaining traction. So why he just now decided to pick up steam, we don't know for sure. But Lieutenant Griffiths, you've dealt with this type of situation before. What do you think perhaps is the tactic here or the end game for this driver in this pursuit?
Well, normally when they start picking up speed, they think they're gaining a little distance on the police cars, so they can get a little bit of distance and maybe jump out of the car and run and get a couple of seconds of advantage on the run. But again, the helicopter's overhead, so they're really not going to be able to secrete themselves anywhere that the helicopter's not going to find them.
And at what point, Lieutenant, does the LAPD or even the CHP say, you know, this is not worth it? There are so many resources being put on this one driver, this one suspect. At what point does LAPD say, you know what, we're just going to stop?
Well, if they know who the driver is and they can contact them later, that's one reason they could stop. Again, if he's a hazard, they'll stop, keep the helicopter following him. There's several things they have to ask themselves. Is it worth, you know, endangering the public to get this guy into custody right now, or can we just try again later?
And at what point do other agencies possibly get involved? Do you think the LAPD is going to be the main agency on this, or perhaps do other cities, you know, I know he's been crisscrossing across the San Fernando Valley. Do you think that perhaps other agencies may step in as well?
Well, as long as they have radio contact and they have their helicopter overhead, normally the primary agency will stay involved in the chase. If he gets on the freeway, they offer it to CHP, and in the case of CHP won't chase or join a chase. They will take over a chase, and all the outside units other than CHP have to drop out. But the primary units or the primary agency usually stays with it if they have good communication, they know where they are, and they have backup units with them.
And it looks like the other good news in this chase, it looks like all the other drivers are really heeding the sirens and the flashing lights. And maybe, quite frankly, they're so used to chases now, they're on the lookout and they're ready to just pull over because really this driver has not come into contact with many other drivers. And thankfully, no pedestrians, really. It's really been a quiet Saturday night.
Oh,
and now that I say that, now he's crossing into the oncoming lanes, it looks like.
Yeah, get around traffic here.
Oh, he's in the opposite lanes now going against traffic. Okay, yeah, now it's getting a little bit more dangerous because he's on the wrong side of the road here.
Right. This may be a good opportunity for them to, either slow down or back off from him so he doesn't feel so pressured to keep the speed up or do any dramatic movements.
And it looks like there's the police chopper right there keeping their spotlight on him. Obviously, the concern goes up now, right, Lieutenant Griffiths, because he is driving on the wrong side of the road, and you have to worry for the drivers who may not be aware of what's going on, perhaps not paying attention, coming straight toward him.
Right. He's taking a little bit more chances with the safety of the public. And, it works two ways. If the unit backs off, a lot of times the car will speed up thinking he's gaining distance. And, he'll run red lights and make turns on the wrong side of the road. But if the police car is up closer to him, you've got the lights and siren to warn the traffic ahead of him to get out of the way. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess you'd say.
And who knows, maybe this car only had half a tank of gas or a quarter tank, and maybe at some point they'll run out of gas. We've seen that before as well, where cars just kind of putter to a stop, and that's when they have to give up. So who knows, maybe this chase will go long enough that this car runs out of gas as well.
And Lieutenant Griffiths, some of our viewers, and we encourage people at home, if you have any questions for us or for Lieutenant Griffiths, feel free to tweet us at CBSLA Peter, at CBSLA Andrea. We will try to answer your questions. One of our viewers, Lieutenant Griffiths, wants to know, what happens to these folks after they leave police on a pursuit in terms of jail time and the charges they face?
Well, it depends on what the initial charge is. If it's just failure to yield or a pursuit, there is a felony section for the pursuit if they endanger the public, which, 99% of the pursuits endanger the public. If they get any time, it's probably going to be county time. So, if they want to look at stopping the pursuits or keeping people from running, maybe up the penalty for it. I know they did that years ago. It used to be just a misdemeanor to run unless you hurt somebody, but now it's a felony if you endanger the public or drive recklessly.
And earlier, Lieutenant, there was the possibility we were seeing some reflections in the window on the passenger side. It's not really clear if this driver is alone. How often is it just a driver and not just a driver and a passenger, I should say, in the cars, or are the drivers usually alone in pursuits?
Yeah, it varies. It could be a carload of people just goofing around, or it could be one guy that's wanted for something that just doesn't want to go to jail. I think I understood earlier that the Metro units from LAPD were the ones that initiated this pursuit, so they may have been watching for this car. They may have some want that we don't know about. Normally, Metro doesn't do just routine traffic stops. They usually go after the major players.
And it looks like this driver is kind of back to where it all began, in the Pacoima area, now in the Sun Valley area, sort of keeping to some of the streets that he was on earlier, Laurel Canyon Boulevard, San Fernando Road. Here he is, again, here on a residential area, a street in the Sun Valley area, but going at a pretty steady speed. He's slowing down again, it seems. So why all of a sudden he went from slow to fast and now back to slow? Again, this must be something that the officers are probably frustrated with, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I would assume the primary officer feels like going up there and, just doing the pit maneuver and spinning the guy around. But you got to maintain the discipline, and it's at this point, following him at this speed is not as hazardous as attempting one of those maneuvers.
And Lieutenant, at this point, who is making those calls? Is it somebody back at the station who's watching the chopper? Who's making the calls as to what to do next, as far as a pit maneuver or just stay on the driver?
Well, you do have a watch commander at the station that's probably watching this broadcast. You've got a sergeant that's usually involved in the pursuit as the second or third unit. And the biggest responsibility goes to the primary unit. He has the authority to terminate the pursuit or cancel the pursuit if he deems it's getting too dangerous or hazardous.
Now this driver seems to be going really slow. It's almost like he's going at a crawl here through that intersection. Who knows if it's because he wants that or if it's because perhaps the vehicle's starting to run out of gas. We have one more question for you also, Lieutenant Griffiths, from a viewer on Twitter. Again, you can send us your questions at CBSLA Andrea or at CBSLA Peter. We mentioned earlier there was a passenger, a woman who got out of the vehicle. We don't know if she is a suspect in this, but If she is somebody who is connected with this driver, what kind of charges does a passenger face involved in a police chase?
Excuse me, involved in a police chase, usually none, because they're not in control of the car. If they were involved in some crime other than just the chase, then they would be detained for that crime.
And Lieutenant, we're seeing this driver go slow and then speed up again and then go slow, and we think maybe it's going to come to an end, and then he speeds up again. What is going through the officers' minds? Why can't they, as a viewer, we're watching this saying, why can't they just do a pit maneuver right now? What are the limitations?
Well, it depends on the individual department. And again, if this driver is presumed to be armed, they don't want to spin that guy around and have him facing head-on with them. They want to be able to control the situation, as in a felony stop or a high-risk stop. With certain departments, if it goes for a certain time and they're under a certain miles per hour, they can use their discretion and go ahead and do the pit maneuver. There's very, very few departments now that do not use the pit maneuver, so chances are if you run from the cops, you'll get spun around by the police car.
And again, we are hearing that the driver of this Uber, this Toyota, may be armed. We think there may also be either someone or perhaps even a dog or an animal in the back seat. We saw some type of movement in the back of this car. We don't know if that's a person or a dog. We do know that there was a woman passenger who jumped out right before we started following this chase at around 8:30. Here he is approaching a busy intersection, and he's going to make a turn. When there are other people in the car or even animals, Lieutenant Griffiths, what happens in terms of how the police deal with that?
Well, there's a concern if there's a passenger in the car that may be an unwilling participant in the pursuit. We're looking out for their safety also. We don't want to push it to where we endanger the safety of the passengers. If it's a dog, attack dog, or a trained dog, that's another thing they're going to have to contend with at the end of the pursuit if that dog gets out to attack the officers. So if nothing else, it's a distraction at the end of the pursuit. But again, with passengers, you want to make sure their welfare is looked out for also.
Now, this is Sherman Way, we're being told, in North Hollywood. This driver has gone from Pacoima to Sun Valley, back and forth from those two cities. Now, this driver is in North Hollywood on Sherman Way, and you can see that there's a lot more activity in this area as far as cars, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah, and he did pass the freeway, so
yeah, the 170.
Doesn't want to get on the freeway.
Yeah, that was the 170 freeway he just passed. And as you mentioned, Andrea, definitely seeing more traffic, more congestion here in the North Hollywood area. Earlier when he was in Pacoima and the Sun Valley areas, it seemed pretty empty. He had the road pretty much to himself, but now he's approaching a much busier area here in North Hollywood on Sherman Way. And so obviously that intensifies the danger, Lieutenant Griffiths, especially considering this driver may have a weapon.
Right. And the officers in the pursuit continually reevaluate the situation.
Well, it looks like this driver's slowing down.
It almost, I was thinking the left rear was smoking a little bit, but that may have just...
Let's see what happens. This driver has stopped completely.
Oh, good.
Officers are getting out of their vehicles.
Looks like he's right next to an El Pollo Loco restaurant, so right next to a shopping center, it seems. Several police vehicles now surrounding this car. They are telling this driver to get up with his hands up, to get out and probably back away very slowly. But a relatively peaceful end to this pretty bizarre pursuit that began about a half hour ago in the Pacoima area.
Car doors opening there.
Car doors opening. He was going very slow and steady, but now it seems he is getting out of this vehicle. He is going to hopefully comply with the officer's commands.
And at this point, Lieutenant, what are officers thinking? Because this is a person possibly armed.
Well, they want to take this point slow. As you can see in the screen, there's a guy with a stroller, it looks like, in front of El Pollo. We want to make sure those citizens are out of the way. And oftentimes people, like in El Pollo, will go to the window and put their face against the window and watch the action, thinking it's like a movie or a TV show.
Well, he's got his hands up. He seems like he's doing exactly what the officers are asking. He's getting down on his knees. I'm sure in just seconds they're going to move in and put the cuffs on him. But wow, there's somebody standing right there with the baby stroller.
Oh my